Hi students, this is chapter 11. This chapter is going to be about parenting. So we're going to discuss some concepts about family descent of the bloodline and inheritance of property, different types of parenting styles, discipline in teaching children, and also some of the family dynamics that come with adult children. Alright, so let's take a look at family descent and inheritance. So a patrilineal, meaning father, is going to be tracing the bloodline and the name of the family and also the inheritance of the property through the father's side of the family. So the name and loyalty inheritance will be followed along the father's side of the family in a patriarchal society, typically going to the eldest son. So you'll find this in mostly patriarchal male-dominated society, and this is the most common form of descent and inheritance, so it's called the global norm. A matrilineal descent is more in a matriarchal or female-dominated society, tracing the bloodline, inheritance, power, and property on the mother's side of the family. So this is a rarer form of descent and inheritance. And here in the United States, we have what's called a bilateral for two. So it's going to be tracing the bloodline inheritance more evenly, more egalitarian on both mom and dad's side of the family, where inheritance and property is going to be passed through all the siblings regardless of their sex. So diving into parenthood, let's first take a look at what's happening with birth rates. Overall birth rates in the United States have been going down for the last 40 years. They've been pretty much going down among all ethnic groups and all races. However, when it comes to whites and Caucasians, their birth rates are even lower. And so they are experiencing what's called a negative birth rate, which basically means more white people are dying than being born. So what is happening and is going to continue to happen is that our society is going to become more racially and ethnically diverse as the birth rates start to rise among other ethnic groups, and percentage-wise goes down for whites. So let's dive into different styles of parenting. The first one is called an authoritarian type of parent. They tend to be kind of like a drill sergeant, very demanding, very controlling, not very bending, and they tend to use a lot of punishment. And sometimes this can cause some friction, some tension between the parent and the child, just because the level of control. The permissive parent is going to be on the other end of the spectrum. They're a little bit too laid back. They are supportive. They love their children. They're a little bit overindulgent, but they're also a little too lenient. Sometimes they can be guilty of trying to be a friend instead of being a parent. So that's not good either. The third one is called an authoritative parent. This is probably the healthiest one. This is the balance between holding accountability and also being loving and supportive of your child. So there's rules in place, there's guidelines in place, there's punishments in place, but also you lift your child up and you're also supportive as well. The fourth one is the uninvolved parent. This can happen in a couple of different ways. Sometimes the parent is absent, they're just not there at all. And sometimes they are there, but they're not emotionally there. They're just kind of there physically. They may be taking care of the child, but they're really not providing a lot of emotional support to the child. So that can cause a lot of issues and problems within the family dynamic between the parent and the child as well. Kind of moving into different types of parental terms. You know, a lot of times we think about a baby being born, but also if you are a new father or new mother, well, then now a parent is born. That's a new role for you. Role ambiguity is the confusion or the uncertainty that can come with being a new parent. So with any new parent, it's exciting, but there can be some confusion. You know, you're not really fully sure what you're supposed to do. You're trying to really kind of move forward and be the best parent you can be, but it's a learning process. So ambiguity means it's a little bit unclear, but as time goes by, you do get a little bit better. Role strain is the stress or the anxiety that comes from being a parent. We have to take care of ourselves and make sure that if we are under stress as parents, that we are emotionally and psychologically taking care of ourselves so we can take better care of our children. The last one is called role conflict. This is the dynamic where you may feel like you're being pulled in different directions, causing some conflict. You know, you're a parent, but you also may be a husband and wife, and you're also have job responsibilities. So this is the conflict that can occur whenever you feel like you're being pulled in two different directions and you're wearing a lot of different hats. Fatherhood, a lot is changing, especially with each and every generation. Today, fathers are more hands-on than previous generation, and there is a slow rise of stay-at-home fathers, stay-at-home dads. A lot of women are career-oriented, a lot of mothers are career-oriented, and sometimes she may be the one who is working as the primary breadwinner, and the father may actually be staying home, especially during those very early years of raising babies and raising toddlers before they go into kindergarten. So this can help reduce the overall mother stress if dad is really kind of stepping in to help out, and it also increases marital satisfaction because they're working together, and it also really increases that bond between father and child, which is really important. You got to work on that bond from the moment that they're born. You can't just wait until you think they have memories to try to step in. You got to start from day one, really being there with feeding the child, changing the child, bathing the child, playing with the child, reading to the child. All those things are really important. So with the rise of the two-income family, both mom and dad or parents working outside the home, we are seeing a rise of what's called latchkey kids. This started to really take off in the 1980s whenever I was growing up, because a lot of us Gen Xers, our moms were working outside the home, so a lot of us came home to an empty household with a key that we would wear around our neck. And since women are even a bigger driving force in the workforce, we're seeing more and more kids these days. They're coming home to an empty home, and so it's really important to make sure that if your kids are coming home by themselves, that they are old enough and mature enough to be able to do that, and also teaching them safety precautions if they are going to be home. It's not advisable to have a kindergartner, first grade, and really young children be by themselves. That can be quite dangerous, so you got to make sure that it is age appropriate. And so I just mentioned that there's a rise of the two-income family. So this chart here goes back to 1980 up until much more recent times. You can see the dual income or the two-income households in the red been climbing up. So in 1980, around 6 million two-income households. Now it's pushing more like 13, 14 million. And as we're seeing that, we're seeing the decline of the single-income household, where it was typically just the father and the husband who is the primary breadwinner. So these trends are kind of moving in different directions. Okay, so now let's talk about discipline and teaching. So when I teach about discipline, I also want to throw in, what we're really doing is we're trying to teach our children. We're trying to teach them the right way to live. We're trying to teach them a better way to make choices. So it's not just about punishment. It's not just about punishment. It's about teaching them a better way and how to handle things in life so they are more functioning members of society. So a lot of times when we think about punishment, we do think about corporal punishment, which is another word for spanking. We are seeing a global decline of corporal punishment all over the world, especially in industrialized democratic nations. We're seeing it not only declining in the schools, but we're also seeing it decline in the homes as well. And you yourself, you may notice that the school systems around here, even in Central Arkansas, are starting to take spanking out of the school systems. So like I said, there's a decline in this trend of spanking in the homes, in the schools, especially among the younger generation, parents of the millennials and the Gen Z. Corporal punishment is less prevalent among girls compared to boys. It is less prevalent in the northern states compared to the southern states. The southern states tend to be more religious. They tend to be more punitive when it comes to corporal punishment. It's more culturally acceptable down here in the South, even though it's becoming less and less culturally acceptable. It's also less prevalent among educated parents compared to uneducated parents, because educated parents who've taken sociology courses and psychology courses and parenting courses, they usually, if they do use corporal punishment, it's usually a last resort. It's like they tried everything else and it may be a last resort, or they may decide to not do it at all. They may decide to positively reinforce the good behavior. They may decide to take away privileges and groundings and other forms of punishment instead of spanking. And if you take a look at this global chart here, well, it's not completely global. It's basically the United States on the left, and on the right you have Western Europe. The green areas are the countries that have taken corporal punishment out of the schools and out of the home. There are a few dozen countries around the world that it is illegal to spank your children in schools and in the homes. The blue areas, both in the United States and also in Western Europe, those are the countries or the states over here that have taken corporal punishment out of the schools. So as you can see, Western Europe is becoming slowly more green, and is probably going to be moving into those other countries that they're going to be taking corporal punishment out of the home. And as you can see, the United States is slowly becoming more blue. I'm not talking about politically blue. I'm talking about taking corporal punishment out of the schools, and that is slowly starting to happen here, even in our state of Arkansas. So what that tells you is that the trend of corporal punishment, the perspective of corporal punishment is changing. So the trend is moving in that direction, and most likely it's going to move down here to the south. And I predict at some point there will be a state in the United States that will be outlawing corporal punishment even in the home. So I think this trend of the green is going to be starting in Western Europe and moving over here to the United States at some point. So let's take a look at positive parenting. It's kind of a new trend that's going on now as we're kind of moving away a little bit from corporal punishment. So some aspects of positive parenting is redirecting young children. Sometimes young children, especially toddlers, can get hyper-focused on something, get very upset. And sometimes it's just a matter of redirecting them, taking them outside, go do something else, and just kind of move the negativity towards something a little bit more positive, a little bit more fun. Another aspect of positive parenting is verbal instruction. This is basically explaining. It's not just, hey, don't do that because I said so. Let me teach you a better way. You messed up here, and I understand you don't know that there's a better way, but look, let me show you a better way to handle this situation. What we're doing, we're teaching children, we're trying to get them to a point where they are young adults and they're making good decisions, but the only way they can do that is if we model that behavior and we teach them through instruction. We also want to make sure that we are keeping our children accountable, calling them out when they're doing something wrong, but also making sure that we are not only modeling good behavior, but we're also positively reinforcing their good behavior, acknowledging it. All these things are going to be really important aspects in raising children. So now let's kind of move on. Now we have adult children. There's a lot of young adults 18 and older that are still living at home. Some of them, they move away from home. But let's see here. So take a look at this chart here. The share of young adults living with their parents is continuing to rise. It is rising. It's called the extension of adolescence. So only about 11% of young adults 25 to 34 were living at home. And as you can see, we're kind of moving into the 2020s and a little bit later on that's moved up to around 17%. It's probably pushing around 20% right now due to COVID and the massive inflation that we're actually experiencing. Things are very expensive, so young adults are living home much longer. A lot of them are deciding to live home longer, not just due to inflation, but also because they're trying to finish their education, their higher education. They're going to college, and it just seems to be a lot easier and a lot cheaper to stay at home with their parents. So if we kind of break it down into men and women and different age groups, we can see that those that are 18 to 24, right out of high school, working on their bachelor's degree, that around 60% of young men are still living at home, and around 53% of women are still living at home with their parents. Most likely this is due to them being in college, working part-time, and just trying to get their degrees completed. But as you're kind of moving into your mid-20s to your 30s, you can see these numbers are really starting to drop at this point. Still kind of high, 22% of young men still living with mom and dad at 25 years old to 34, and 17% of females. So it has gone down, probably because they finished their education. A lot of them are getting married, but some of them that are deciding to stay home, it could be due to the cost of living. They may be single. They may be trying to get more advanced education, but it just kind of shows you trend-wise what is happening there. So the empty nest syndrome, this is something I'm actually experiencing right now. The empty nest, and so this is going to be whenever your children are raised and they have moved out of the house, and now this kind of puts mom and dad in a situation where they have to go through an adjustment. They have to adjust to the fact that their children are grown and moved out, and they're not in this daily process of parenting their children anymore. When it comes to the syndrome of empty nest, this has to do with the feelings of loss or some anxiety that comes whenever your children grow up and move away. Now, everybody feels this to some extent, some more than others, but stay-at-home moms that have really kind of dedicated their life to taking care of the house and taking care of their children, they tend to struggle with this more because their whole identity and their whole purpose and a big part of their day-to-day lives was centered around raising their children. So it's going to be really important for them specifically to take on new roles, new hobbies, new objectives, maybe even go back to college to try to transition through what's called the empty nest syndrome. And that's going to be true for even fathers who've been working or mothers who've been working. You got to take on new roles, new hobbies, maybe be a little bit selfish, do some things for yourself, and just understand this is a new chapter in life. And next, sometimes we have a situation where they do leave the nest for a little while, but then they come back. They're returning to the nest. This is called boomerang children. This is actually on the rise, where young adults are coming back home. And it's usually because there's some sort of situation that's happening. They may have experienced some sort of job loss or some major financial issues. They need to come back home for a little while to kind of get on their feet. They may be going through a separation or a divorce, so they need that family support. Could be an injury or a disability. They may decide to go back to college and they decide to come back home. But usually this is kind of a temporary situation where they're coming home for a little while just to kind of get back on their feet, get their life back. But most of them, their objective is to kind of pull things back together and to leave the nest again. And that is it for this chapter. Please email me if you have any questions at all. Thank you.